Yeah, today's video is what if Sierra, Aljandro and Blaineley were in Revenge of the Island Part 2. So this is my continuation for the timeline. So let's begin. So I think Courtney would still be bossy enough on the team to suggest Lindsay, but I feel like here, in this universe, Rick ends up being here because Rick was pretty close to Revenge of the Island to get pretty far, and even gender for number of guys and girls. I think Rick makes the most sense because he made it a lot further than Sam. So I think Brick would end up pulling for his team. And I think it would be Joe, and Aljandro still wins the challenge. And I think Courtney is annoyed because she's trying to get over Brick. But I feel like in this universe, the others wouldn't listen. And I think Mike, Zoe, Brick, and Sam, Cameron, are pretty much annoyed with Courtney. So I think Courtney is the first boot of the season. Episode 2. This is the pieces episode. They have to make all the pieces. So I feel like Aljandro walking on his hands. Brick would be pretty good at this challenge in Manitoba. Scott Stacks hit Mike with a shovel. And I think a Lightning would still miscount the pieces, so unfortunately for Lightning, I think he gets voted off. Episode 3 is where Private Leech was. Joe would still shoot Scott. Duncan would still save Gwen from the leech. I think Lindsay gets shot and Cameron. Brooke would be very well this challenge. I think Aljandro and Heather get shot arguing. Gwen gets shot, and I think it doesn't much look out Blaineley. And I think Brick would win the challenge, because I think it would be ironic if Brick beat Joe in this episode. And there's no reason for Joe not to get eliminated, because Blaineley's here, like, even though Blaineley's still here, there's no reason for her not to get eliminated. Duncan wouldn't swap teams, because first of all, there's no Courtney, so there's no one villainous enough on that team to get him swapped over. Episode 4, the Pancakes episode. Sam would still be cheating. I think the heroes would lose the challenge and they get rid of Sam. Episode 5, Mood Madness. I think Aljandro do what he did in the original. I think here Brick Duncan would go around the bridge with Gwen. And because Courtney's not here, she's not trying to have that friendship off with Courtney. So her and Duncan are probably in a much better place. And I think both teams make it back and they're both going elimination. But whoever gets crossed first wins immunity. So I think Brick would win immunity. And I think Aljandro would win immunity. I think Duncan and Gwen would convince Scott to get rid of Heather, and I think Aljandro and Heather Blaineley would work being an alliance. So first of all, these three would be together. They vote for Sierra, and then the others. I think Heather, Aljandro try and get Duncan and Gwen, so they already have 2 votes. And I think they might get rid of Scott here, but I think Gwen's going to work with Aljandro a bit more, so I think Gwen and Duncan vote for Heather, so I think Heather just gets sent home. Because Aljandro's immune. I think Gwen gets voted off, but I think Blaineley says to Aljandro Scott through last season. I think Aljandro knows that. So I think they work together. They convince Heather to get rid of Scott, and I think these 3 would vote for Blaineley. So I think in a tiebreak between Scott and Blaineley, I do think Blaineley would lose the tiebreaker. Episode 6. Opposite the egg inspection, I think Zoe might still win the challenge. And I think Heather finds the idol. Everyone loves Aljandro. Aljandro uses the idol, gets rid of Heather. Episode 7. This is the Fears challenge. Zoe gets a free point for last round. Aljandro gets a point for fighting his brother Jose. Mike gets a point for his fear against Izzy. Gwen's fear wouldn't be Courtney because Courtney's not here. So I imagine it would be being buried in the ground. We know Gwen can do that. Duncan's fear wouldn't be the bird because he's not going through that arc. I'm a bad boy, I'll do what I want. So I think his fear would be the cardboard, and I think he passes. Scott loses to Fang. Brick in the dark fails. Lindsay's fighting someone bad haircuts, she could pass. Cameron fails, and because there's two people on the heroes, there's the one person on the villains, I think that means the villains win this challenge. And I think the villains would choose to get rid of, between these 5 people, I think they would look at these 3 in an alliance. And I think the person who would choose to eliminate would be Zoe. Would be Brick, because Brick is the biggest threat. That's not immune. I know Mike, Zoe, and Cameron are an option, but then 3-person alliance, Lindsay's not really a threat. Brick's the most physically athletic in challenges, so I think they actually get rid of Brick here. And we are at the merge. So it's merge day, the merge casts. So this is the merge. Okay, so episode 8 is the boat race. So Duncan and Gwen. Mike's by himself. Zoe, Mike. Aljandro gets on the boat by himself. Gwen and Duncan. And then Scott, Lindsay, Cameron, and Zoe on the raft. So Aljandro usually wins the challenge, but because Duncan would never vote Chris's mansion, there's no reason for him to be in dead last for some reason. Because everyone takes a while, and Courtney and Aljandro's boats seem to be malfunctioning, and again, Duncan's in dead last because he's very slow to get back to the dock for some reason. So I think Aljandro still wins immunity, but he has Gwen and Duncan's vote. I think Scott's kind of with them, and I think it doesn't take much to get Lindsay on side either. So I think Aljandro kind of makes a villains alliance with the other villains, right? And I feel like Lindsay is convinced, and I think this is where, like, originally Rick votes against Cameron, because Duncan never goes to the mansion, there's no reason for Cameron to not get screwed over. Episode 9 is where we have Zeke shall find. Okay. So I think here, Alandra's by himself, Duncan and Gwen are together, Scott's by himself, Mike and Zoe together, and Lindsay's by herself. I think Alandra gets caught by himself and Scott. It doesn't take much to get Lindsay either. And I think Mike and Zoe get caught. Duncan saves Gwen, so I think Gwen wins immunity and makes things right with Duncan. And I think because Duncan's a lot more athletic than Cameron, he doesn't get injured. And because it's Aljandro, and I think it's a vote. Like, I think they realize they kind of need they don't need Aljandro. And because Aljandro would see there are 2 couples, I think he makes his alliance with Scott. And he also tries to make an alliance with Lindsay because he sees 2 couples in the game. So I think Aljandro gets voted off because he's the biggest threat that doesn't have immunity. I think he's the best in overall challenges, so I think Aljandro gets voted off. Episode 10, the obstacles. I think Mike wins the challenge. I think Duncan's really close, and I think Duncan would try to convince Scott and Lindsay. I think Scott is willing to listen to Duncan because I think Scott and Duncan would get on pretty well throughout this season. I think Scott's a bit more devious than he is in the original. And Lindsay can easily be convinced because I think her and Gwen are friends. So I think, unfortunately, for Duncan and Gwen, because they are friends with Zoe, Zoe has to get voted off here. Because Mal has immunity. Episode 11 is the ice cream episode. I think Scott would win the challenge. Duncan would win because Duncan's rotating challenge is like, it's not so much a speed challenge, but I do think Duncan would win the challenge. So him and Gwen have immunity. I think everyone votes for Mal here because he's the biggest threat. So I think even though Scott would see Gwen and Duncan as a threat because they're a couple. I think he would rather face them as a couple than Mal. Episode 12. So Scott has the diamond. Lindsay gets the Yeti. Gwen gets the painting. Duncan gets the statuette. Okay. So Duncan would think Duncan was his house. I don't think Mouse is originally, but it just seems like a decent piece of logic that makes some sense. So I think Duncan would search there. Lindsay has the easiest task of drawing the Yeti, where Scott and Gwen's items can take some time that they don't have. And because I don't know what the statuette is, we never find out what the statuette is. So fourth place, Duncan. And Lindsay's going to take Scott to the end because even though Scott's a villain, Gwen's made it in the finale before and do a much bigger threat, and she's done better in challenges. Whereas Scott's not really done that bad historically in this season. So I do think Scott would make it into the end. So Lindsay and Scott are in the finale. So that's it for this video. I think I was watching this immersion. Well, if Lindsay and Scott, if Aljandro, Sierra, Blaineley were in Revenge of the Island Part 2, this is a continuation. I actually write as one's very interesting. I'd have Scott win the season, but I probably think Lindsay would win because she's a fan favourite, but I think personally it makes the most sense for Lindsay to win, but yeah. Peace, farewell.